Thưa quý vị, và tiếp tục sự kiện ngày hôm nay, chúng ta sẽ cùng đến với một phiên tọa đàm với một chủ đề rất quan trọng trong lĩnh vực blockchain, đó chính là Sandbox. Ladies and gentlemen, up next we will transition into an engaging panel discussion on a very important topic in the world of blockchain, which is Sandbox. Thưa quý vị, Sandbox là một khái niệm có lẽ không còn xa lạ đối với những ai quan tâm đến công nghệ blockchain, và nó đóng vai trò quan trọng trong việc thử nghiệm, đổi mới và phát triển các giải pháp công nghệ mới. Vậy thì làm như thế nào để tối ưu hóa Sandbox để hỗ trợ sự phát triển của blockchain, và vai trò của Sandbox sẽ định hình tương lai của ngành công nghiệp này ra sao? Và những câu hỏi này chúng ta sẽ cùng được tìm hiểu thông qua phiên tọa đàm tiếp theo ngay sau đây. Ladies and gentlemen, the Sandbox concept, familiar to those interested in blockchain technology, plays a vital role in testing, innovating, and developing the new technological solutions. But how can we optimize Sandbox environments to support blockchain development? And how will Sandbox shape the future of this industry? The answers will be found in the upcoming panel discussion. Thưa quý vị, và ngay sau đây hãy cùng với chúng tôi chào đón lên sân khấu sự tham gia của các diễn giả. We would like to invite Miss Quynh, founder, Sui Blockchain Hub. Mr. Keto, CEO, Nexus. Xin được trân trọng kính mời Mr. Nguyễn Chung, CPO at SSID. And Miss Sasha Asheghi, founder, Arcanum Ventures, our moderator. Over to you, Mr. Sasha.
Thank you so much. First and foremost, I would like to thank FPT, SSI, all of the partners, all of the sponsors for hosting this incredible event. It's very beautiful, and it's very, very wonderful to be here speaking with you three about blockchain sandbox and the regulatory landscape here in Vietnam and the greater part of Southeast Asia. First, before we start, I'd like to maybe run through our panel and have each of you give a brief minute on your experience within blockchain and what interests you about it, and how you've come to be here today. Mr. Chung, if you don't mind starting.
Okay. First of all, I want to say hello with everyone and say thank you with you guys to today, still here to listen our panel. My name is Chung. I work in the blockchain industry about 7 years. And I work for Tambit, UTU, and SSID. So with long-time experience, like investor and builder, I really focusing on the way how to get the sandbox in Vietnam, because it's very important for blockchain and crypto can develop in Vietnam.
Incredible experience, a real legend in this industry, and someone very focused on product development and design, which is very, very powerful. Mr. Donnellan.
Absolutely, and thank you so much, Sasha. First and foremost, really grateful to the organizers, the people who put this fantastic event together. So couldn't have been happier to have been selected for this panel, because I've been involved in the regulated space since 2015, helped start one of Hong Kong's very first remittance-based e-wallets, before pivoting into starting one of the first licensed exchanges in Southeast Asia back in it was towards the end of 2017. After that, began working with derivatives exchanges, and in recent times, we've actually worked towards starting a licensed RWA platform, enabling users globally to participate in primary and secondary offerings, and to be able to move the Web3 world really into a more regulated, legitimized space. So couldn't be happier to be here, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. It's a great experience as well. You focusing on the decentralized finance side, which has really, over the past 5 years, I believe, pushed the regulatory landscape in the first place. Yeah.
So there are a couple of challenges there. When you're talking about the DeFi side, you need to make it permissioned, implement AML, KYC policies within a decentralized context. People were talking about ZK before this. That's one of the potential solutions, but that's something we'll go over during the course of the panel.
Absolutely. And Miss Quynh, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good to be back here and do the introduction again. My name is Quynh, founder of Sui Blockchain Hub. So I started to join blockchain since 2016, 17. And actually, I remember that the first time I heard about Bitcoin was 2010, when I was studying investment and risk management in UK. So the flatmate, he's a computer science, teaching about computer science in a university in London. And then after 6 years, after that, I didn't really care about that, right? And until 2016, when another friend who was doing AI and computer science just came back and we talked about that, and oh my God, what did I miss for the last 6 years? So much, I miss it. Then I started to join and skin in the game. And I started to realize that, wow, Vietnam actually has so much potential for this, especially in terms of builders, and how we can support builders in Vietnam to leverage all of this. And also even through this, we can help them to build the great product with the blockchain application, and also, helping Vietnam also become one of the hub in the region. So that's how I started to join this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this blockchain industry that we referred to is very exciting, but sometimes intimidating because there's so much happening. It's happening so fast, especially here within Vietnam. So it's easy to get caught up, but very exciting every way you turn your head. And before we dive into the ideas and the concepts around regulatory sandbox, I do want to offer a bit of a definition. And this is a definition, I believe, from Investopedia, which is a good source of information. A regulatory sandbox for blockchain is is an environment that's created and controlled by regulatory authorities to allow blockchain-based projects or businesses to test their innovations under relaxed or temporarily regulatory conditions. This offers close interactions with the regulators to make sure there's legal compliance and greater investor confidence. And I think we've seen several examples of blockchain regulatory sandbox globally. We've seen the European blockchain regulatory sandbox, which is very limited in scope. It allows a landscape for a limited number of projects or startups to operate under close regulatory oversight to make sure that they adhere to compliance measures that are currently being developed, especially with MiCA, and then what might come later. We've seen examples in United Arab Emirates and Singapore as well, where those examples have kind of evolved to be a bit more broad and loose. And in those circumstances, I believe they've really fostered a landscape of strong development where many blockchain-based builders are moving to because they see that regulators are a bit more lenient and they can develop very fast and fail fast. But with those examples in mind, I want to ask each of you specifically, what do you envision as far as a perfect regulatory sandbox framework within Vietnam? Mr. Chung.
Okay. This is a really hard question to answer because really don't easy to imagine thing like the sandbox thing not happen yet. But I think with a perfect sandbox, if we can do 4 things. The first thing is understanding. That means every who joins the industry can understand everything, like government, company, and user. Government needs to understand why in blockchain, in cryptocurrency, one project can make in 2 hours. Before we do in traditional, one startup can do in 2 years. Now in 2 hours, it's totally different. So the first of all, everything need to understanding. So the perfect sandbox help people to understanding, and the second thing is negotiating. That means everything after that need to be to be how to say managing, controlling by the government. The third thing is building the market. So the sandbox need to help us to building the market. If this sandbox can help us to building the market, that means it's a perfect sandbox, right? The last thing is protecting. That means the sandbox need to understanding and protecting the user, protecting everything, everyone join our game. So sandbox in my mind for perfect sandbox need to be help people to understanding, negotiating, building the market and protecting the people.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a big challenge, but very rewarding nonetheless when testing a lot of these economic theories, while also making sure that there are consumer protections, especially for retail-focused products or startups. Mr. Donnellan.
Absolutely. So one of the big misnomers is that sandboxes by definition are Web3 focused. Actually, Hong Kong, Singapore, and a number of other jurisdictions have been experimenting with the sandbox model for a very long time, since probably the inception of fintech. A lot of great companies, a lot of wallets, a lot of great service providers have actually come from sandbox initiatives organized in places like Hong Kong. Air Wallets, Hex Trust, actually Cyberport, if you're familiar with it, had not only a sandbox, but an incubation program to actually help budding businesses go from the point of inception to execution to subsequently exiting. But when you look at the model of sandboxes as they currently exist, a very important factor is ascertaining what they're looking for from the sandbox model. If you look at Hong Kong right now, they've recently established something called Project Ensemble. Well, right now what they're experimenting with is real-world asset tokenization. So you have HSBC who have been invited, Standard Chartered, Bank of China, ICBC, and a number of other major mainland banks to actually look at how they're able to tokenize, put certain assets on chain, which effectively involves a trust model, basically holding the assets in trust, tokenizing the proportion of assets in trust with each of those tokens representing a share. It's a very simple way of doing it. But they're looking at how this can work and whether or not they should make it available to retail investors or they should keep it exclusively available to accredited investors. So these are all important factors. However, if you look to the Philippines, so where I have a bit more experience from 2018, when they were establishing their sandbox, they were aiming to evaluate, can stablecoins, for example, work for remittance purposes, which actually brought in fantastic results, but they were also looking at broader tokenization. And at that point in time, they decided against it for the simple reason that their definition of what constituted a token eligible to be listed on any Philippine licensed exchange ought to be considered a security unless proven otherwise. So they actually tightened down on regulations directly after the sandbox or the end of the term of the sandbox, as opposed to following the advice, working with industry professionals, and it actually put a lot of people off working with the Philippine Central Bank, the Bank of Central Filipinas, at that moment in time. So it's really important to evaluate what they're looking for from this model. Is it an institutional play? Are they looking for more by way of foreign direct investment, which was the case with Hong Kong and Singapore? Or are they aiming to support local and homegrown enterprises? And from there, basically providing the right framework and the right incentives for entrepreneurs.
That's a very interesting example. And I think one of the biggest takeaways I'm hearing is that one of the main purposes of operating a regulatory sandbox is taking lessons and understanding how that ties into the larger economy or the future vision of tech development within Vietnam and Southeast Asia. So that's interesting. Miss Quynh.
Yeah, I totally agree with Chung and Kato about, your idea of like what is the ideal sandbox thing for blockchain. So for me, I think that, whatever that the sandbox is, it's just like, I think I'm very simple and also very optimistic. This like, how we can support the founders and the builders to building the real project that also can have a lot of benefits from it. So what kind of benefits? As you mentioned that, okay, understanding, right? So of course that they also understanding the current, situation, and they also can build and apply and find the solution. And then they also can, bring it, the real impact to the real world, but with the benefits. So for example, with the regulation to protect the founders and builder, to protect the project, the regulation that also can give them some, protection for experiments, and also the benefits for, even in terms of tax or, employees, support, that kind of thing. And then also look at the other side of it, like, okay, so how also like we can support the regulators, and also like, how to support the economy impact. So for the regulator, as Chung mentioned, also like, okay, help them to understand like how the builders and the founder actually also building, what is the real application on that, and then what is the process, what is the challenges for them, so they also can do the right regulation to support them, and also like to do the experiment. So for example, instead of we immediately bring it to the world, we can have the sandboxes, like, to do the experiment. Let's say that, okay, test it out from the idea, build the MVP, test it on like 100 people, and scale it up to like several thousand of people. And then after that, we see the impact, we can bring it to the world. So it's like, more sustainable that way. And also like in terms of trust, that is a key thing, because the sandbox is the, the way that, to also like protect the investor who, early believe and trust all the builders, all the founder from very early stage also. So when they see that, okay, hey, they have this idea and they apply on this, and also like when work with the sandbox, zone, or, even work with the government, then of course that investor also have more trust on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these are all really good points. And, it leads us to maybe the next topic, which is the impact of the sandbox. After understanding how that regulatory framework might look like, we can turn to examples like I mentioned in Dubai and Singapore, where the sandbox model was sort of adopted in a more widespread use case. And we've seen some of the effects of, in Dubai particularly, not only just implementing the sandbox, but discussing regulations and the regulatory framework back in 2021 that I believe led to a 500% increase in cryptocurrency or blockchain transactions within the country. And then after establishing the regulatory sandbox and then broadening that scope, Dubai had seen a 30% increase in new incorporated companies that are blockchain-based moving towards the country. So I wanted to ask you, what kind of impact do you foresee within Vietnam in adopting a framework like this, or building out a framework? And how does that kind of position Vietnam as a thought leader for maybe expanding that framework across the rest of Southeast Asia?
This is, I think the question in terms of impact for sandbox for blockchain in Vietnam right now is still very early stage, to be honest, because actually, I know that the government, the regulator, policymaker also talk a lot about this for the last years, but we haven't got the concrete, let's say that regulation or the details of the sandbox for blockchain. So the impact of it, to be honest, I don't know yet. But as a ecosystem builder, and also talking with other, also like policymakers and also other builders, this is what we hope. Let's say that we hope, and what we also can kind of foresee, like maybe let's say that next year, Vietnam have the sandbox for blockchain. What is the impact for that? So number one, definitely, I think that in terms of supporting builders and founders, that will be totally different scene for building projects here, because like right now, even for Web2, not only say that Web3, a lot of startup projects, even like building the company or startup company in Singapore instead of Vietnam, so they can have the better benefit for the tax, right? And then that's how also like Singapore can attract a lot of money or investment in Singapore. So if we also have the good regulation and support the blockchain company and startup, we also can attract a lot of investment here to the country. That's number one thing. Second, that also I can see that a lot of projects will be built and will be feel more confident to experiment or even expanding their project in Vietnam and build a company, register the company in Vietnam, and for that also relate to the mass adoption for blockchain in Vietnam way much more bigger. So right now, even for crypto user, right, it's still in the gray zone, right? But we see that Vietnam is always top 3 market for the growth rates for the crypto user over the world already. Let's say that even for transaction, in this market, like 10 billion, 7 billion in one day is something like that. It's huge already. So it means that, in terms of economy, that's amazing. And the next thing I see that also the impact for that is in terms of real world use case. That's what I really, really care about, right? So when we have the sandbox zone, or even let's say that, okay, we have the sandbox physical hub in Ho Chi Minh City, in Hanoi, in Da Nang, let's say that. And then whoever project, let's say that we incubate, we support 20 projects per year. And then we support them hey, the government can support in terms of even venue, office, or tax benefits, and that kind of thing. So that also help them to have more support, more resources, and that also help them more sustainable. So we also can see that what works and what doesn't work. And it can come back to regulation thing, right? So the regulator also say okay, so for this, how we can make the right regulation to support others, builders, founder, and also how to grow the ecosystem in Vietnam. Let's say that also Singapore, they also have the regulation for crypto. Dubai, also the same as you just mentioned. And for that impact, I don't need to mention it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Chung, I'd love to hear your opinion on this one.
I totally agree with Quynh that we do not know that's the impact if we have sandbox in Vietnam next year or later, how it is. But I've for sure 100% the impact will go by the positive way, not negative way, because you see Vietnam is a really young country, and you see before when we do anything, we feel like we step back with the other country in the world year 20 year or something. But the first time in Vietnam we have one thing we do, and we stop with the other country in the world. So when you guys come here, you see the smart adoption, and I learned the words Quynh say, confidence. When we make the builder, we make the founder in Vietnam quite confident, and we can get all of them into one network, the networking and helping others. This is really good. So I do not know the impact, how's the impact for the sandbox in Vietnam, but I am sure that the impact will be good for Vietnam in the positive way. Yeah.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
in long term.
Long term, absolutely, and that's something that I want to discuss next. I love this point you made about this culture within Vietnam, and I've spent a good amount of time within Vietnam over the past couple of years, and I've learned to understand some really interesting things that I really love. And one of the jokes I make with friends and family back home is there's such a strong sense of entrepreneurship within Vietnam. It seems like you can buy a coffee pot and start a company. And I love what you had mentioned before, Miss Quynh, about the idea of creating this regulatory sandbox where you have support coming in from the authorities or the regulators, but also local businesses around. And it seems like all of the different pieces of the machine will mobilize. And I do have a question for you, Mr. Donnellan, because you mentioned something interesting in a previous example around how a sandbox program had worked to inform a lot of regulations and then policy making and law making and legal structures. And so what do you foresee the long-term broadened scope of a sandbox What does that impact kind of look like when we're talking about auxiliary impact? And some examples, just to get your thoughts going, come to mind for me are within academia and research, when we're talking about understanding these policies and figuring out how to deal with an evolving landscape, the financial and banking sectors, insurance, real estate, etc. Where do you see some of the bigger unforeseen auxiliary impacts coming in the long term from a sandbox environment?
In terms of auxiliary impacts and in terms of like the broader impacts that may be unforeseen, it's easy to think of quite a few examples. And actually, Quynh touched upon quite a few very good ones, particularly pertaining to tax incentives. One of the initiatives that Malaysia actually recently undertook was to allow for 10-year tax exemptions on capital gains and on certain payroll. Now, of course, it doesn't go all the way down for the founding members. So it's a very good way to actually look at it by way of how you actually create a more entrepreneurial atmosphere, or how you create a more risk-taking environment within a certain jurisdiction or a certain area that may not otherwise be. But it doesn't just come down to the regulatory side itself, but it's a matter of how you can actually capitalize on the benefits of a certain country. You look at, for example, Singapore, you look at Hong Kong, and arguably Malaysia. They all lack something that Vietnam has in abundance, and that one is tech talent. So you have a certain number of tech entrepreneurs that are waiting to actually capitalize on the benefits that Vietnam can provide. 57,000, I think, is the number of new IT graduates coming from Vietnam universities every single year. So it does demonstrate one key thing, that Vietnam, from a human resource point of view, has certain benefits that are irreplicable. It's just a matter of creating and fostering the right environment to actually bring those to light. And really, it couldn't be more exciting from that standpoint. So creating an atmosphere to capitalize on its core strengths and, of course, scalability across other jurisdictions. That would be one of the core things that I would be personally looking at by way of, if I was to encourage other VCs to look at Vietnam as a place to invest, as a place to set up their company. Now, of course, there are certain things that you probably don't have in Vietnam. For example, common law jurisdictions like Hong Kong, Singapore, just different ways of operating. So it's a matter of bearing these things in mind and looking at what can be provided from a Vietnam standpoint versus what they might look for elsewhere. But in terms of tech talent, in terms of raw companies that are in their early stages looking to scale up globally and internationally, and of course, giving international entrepreneurs a base to operate. RabbitCare is a very good example. They decided to base their HQ in Thailand as an insurance comparison platform. How can Vietnam attract people like those? And in my opinion, it's on the right path. It's just a matter of seeing that in motion over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do have quite a difficult question, maybe for all three of you. And so just to give you a bit of background, at Arcanum Ventures, one of the things that we focus on and specialize in is token economy design, understanding digital asset use cases and how these might evolve as the landscape evolves. And just to give you a specific example, in a lot of cases, a utility token might be seen as a point system for a loyalty program or a promotions program. You might have unique on-chain identifiers for digital identities and for reputation mechanics, etc. And so I've seen a lot of what's happened and unfolded in the regulatory landscape with MiCA and some other regulatory frameworks. And what I am still kind of waiting for is very clear guidance on digital asset use cases, on these types of digital assets that can be offered both to investors, but also used within product ecosystems. And so I was wondering if any of you have an opinion on maybe some of the lessons learned from other sandbox or regulatory environments or frameworks that Vietnam can adopt to kind of improve and maybe clarify some things for entrepreneurs that are developing products that incorporate digital assets into them. Mr. Chung, maybe we can start with you. Sorry to pick on you so much, but you seem so knowledgeable from the product side.
Okay. For this question, I want to answer like my personal opinion because something in Vietnam is totally different with from other country in the world. So maybe we learn something from Mika. We need something from the other sandbox program in the world. But when we apply in Vietnam, it's totally different because we need to understanding the politics in Vietnam. We need to understand the way of Vietnam people thinking, everything. And really hard for me if I can define something in detail here. But hopefully, myself, I spent nearly 5 years to prepare everything about the technical side. That means I prepare everything from the technical side, and I wait for the sandbox, and then I can open everything I done in Vietnam. So everything we like, how to say, the technical, the project, the people, the finance, everything I prepare already. Then I wait for sandbox. But why I say I need to share my opinion, my own opinion, because I think I am the guy in Vietnam want to have the sandbox in Vietnam. The most guy, the most because everything I with me, I'm not do the blockchain in other country. Only prepare to waiting for Vietnam. So I hope you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that response. Mr. Donnellan.
You mentioned Mika. As a European, I can safely say it's an example of what not to do in terms of token regulation. I can rant about this for hours. So basically with Mika, it's an example of how to kill a new and emerging economy. The American approach is basically, and actually the Asian approach too, is effectively allow an industry to grow, find its feet, and then regulate it. The European approach is to kill it or regulate it before it even finds its footing, before it even finds its problem to address. So that's effectively an example of how not to regulate. Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia even have all come out with much better examples of how best to regulate. Even Malaysia right now with Labuan, they're looking very closely at securities licenses, through securities dealership licenses and tokenizing and giving you the ability to tokenize, providing you with the ability to offer secondary trading platforms. All these are actually available, and they were only really observed and put into law as a direct result of sandbox policies. So it gives them a more common sense approach. How does it best work from a long-term perspective? How can you actually provide good regulations that both protect customers and allow the industry to flourish? Those are two of the key points that we've seen. But from a token economy perspective, which Sasha was talking about there, the interesting thing is how the definition of what is a utility will change. Are utilities loyalty points, or do you continue pushing the boundary of what is a utility, of what's a utility versus what's a security? Very good example. I was recently talking to a platform trying to sell the whole thing of music royalties being a utility. That's a direct security. Bowie bonds, which were, their custodies by Prudential, issued by David Bowie, and I think it was the late 90s. Those were one of the classic examples of what constituted a security. Oh, we're only doing commission sharing. That's a profit sharing. It's the same exact principle. So the definition of what's security versus what's a utility will continue to change. And that's a good thing, because it allows people to scale and grow financially, and allows for clear guidelines for attracting investment on a global level. So it's available not only for Vietnamese customers, but global customers. And that's one of the most exciting things there.
Yeah, well said. Thank you.
Sorry, can I have 1 minute? Because when he mentioned something about the tokenization, I remember that and I share with the builder if they want to build a crypto project in Vietnam. Before we have Sandbox, that we cannot tokenization in Vietnam, but we can NFTization. Because in Vietnam we have the law about the connective, so we use NFTizations better than tokenization.
That is good. I like this as well. Miss Quynh, your thoughts?
Talking about the lesson learned from the Sandbox from overseas and how to apply to Vietnam, I think that, definitely I believe that all of us have known about, the regulation in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Dubai, how it really can attract the investment thing for that country. But for me as a, ecosystem builder, I care about how to support the founders and the builder a lot from that perspective. And I think that Vietnam market is really, unique in a way that, let's look at Singapore. Singapore had the clear regulation for now, but they don't have the builder. They even don't have the big crypto user. Malaysia recently, they also on the run a competition to attract, money from blockchain. And they even bring in network school to Malaysia. This to bring in more crypto nomad people to Malaysia. But again, they also don't have the builder community big as Vietnam. Hong Kong, financial hub, but also kind of a lot relate to China. And China regulation also before it's super strict, right? It's even forbidden all the crypto thing. And this recently, last month, after Trump won, the election, and then also China is say that, okay, it's legal, crypto in China. But the last 3 years, a lot of projects and a lot of builders from China moved to San Francisco, to Thailand, to other countries, thus to create their own project and build from out overseas. And so it means that they're running out talents and also money. And Dubai also said, okay, they have a lot of company registered in Dubai thanks to regulation, but also no builders. But Vietnam, what interesting here is we have builders. We have 400,000 builders in blockchain. We have crypto user. We have 18 million crypto user. And as you mentioned that we have 50,000 IT students freshly graded every single year. So we have everything in terms of that. We have a lot of potential to really, bring Vietnam become the hub. But can we get there? Also a lot depend on the regulation here. A lot depend on how the sandbox also can support and flourish all on the side for builders, for founders, and also for the crypto user. Let's make one example. Let's say that, okay, what if one day we have one exchange for blockchain, but made by local Vietnamese builders here, instead of we even using overseas exchange. Let's look at the huge impact for the economy, the number of the transactions that we have, right? Let's say that, okay, we support this, let's say that tax-free for all the startup in blockchain. How many projects that we got? Immediately register the company in Vietnam instead of Singapore, Hong Kong, or BVI or whatever, right? And a lot of investment, a lot of investor will come. So I think that, that is the unique of the Vietnam ecosystem. And I do believe that Vietnam government, they super wise. So they also can, hopefully next year, they also can, launch the sandbox that can support all of us.
It's such a strong point. I really do believe that Vietnam is so strongly positioned here. You're right. There are so many builders. They're working on so many different things. There are so many crypto literate people. And I remember hearing a panel discussion in Ho Chi Minh City where one of the participants was speaking about this concept of human resource arbitrage, he called it, which is a very strange name for it. But the concept is that essentially the cost for a company to employ talented, skilled, or experienced individuals within Vietnam is significantly less than a company that might be operating in Europe or North America. And I believe some sources estimated, like compared to North America or the United States, 80 to 90% less. And it's strange when you talk about arbitrage in markets because they typically are referred to as opportunities, more so financial opportunities. And so do you believe that right now, the way it stands, if Vietnam were to adopt a strong regulatory framework around cryptocurrency or blockchain and entice builders to come, entice founders to come, entice companies to incorporate here, do you believe that this will have a strong impact within the tech industry that is ripe to explode? Or do you believe that it's going to be slower than what we anticipate right now? Let's go with Mr. Donnellan.
So the point you referred to with regards to human resource arbitrage, that was actually one of the main reasons I actually came to Vietnam in the first place. And it's not just in relation to cost. That's one of the most important things to note. One of the reasons why I initially came to Vietnam was because it was actually largely due to the proactiveness, the can-do attitude of the developers. My previous tech team was in China, by the way. And there was a real, once again, this is purely anecdotal, so don't take it as any statistical measurement. But the feeling I got when I was building in China was, what we produce is the best, please don't question us. In Vietnam, it was largely different. We were able to give direct feedback and it was addressed. Now, the talent level was similar, but the attitude was vastly different. And that's really what gave Vietnam the edge. And it was also the fact that you have such entrepreneurial people. You have access to financial talents. We spoke a lot about tech talents, but Vietnam has some fantastic financial talents. Everything probably except legal is what I can find in Vietnam. So as a place to set up a very ambitious company that can work across various verticals within an organization, it is ideally positioned, like everybody here basically mentioned. So it was what attracted me to this area in the first place, the human resources, the potential, the can-do attitude, and also the fact that everybody from top to bottom is simply willing to work as though it's their own company. They're willing to do the arts. They're willing to go beyond the scope of work. Whereas when working in other countries, one of the criticisms I previously had was they would work in silos. This is not my department, therefore it doesn't concern me. Vietnam is vastly different. They're willing to work across departments. Their attitude is good. And ultimately, I tend to encourage entrepreneurs in that aspect. Look at it as a place to set up operations. It's got the talent. It's low cost. What you're getting in comparison with other areas is sensational. So definitely it's ideally positioned.
Yeah, fantastic. Mr. Chung, I'd love to hear your experience on this because you, I believe, have built both products and teams, managed products and teams. And so how do you feel Vietnam is positioned as far as from that high-level perspective to build a strong company, build a number of products, and then compete on a global level with some, let's say, more established products that you might be facing?
Okay, so how long you live in Vietnam already?
I've been in and out of Vietnam for 2 years now.
2 years. So how you feel when you're living in Vietnam?
I'm sorry, could you say that?
How do you feel when you're living in Vietnam for 2 years?
I love everything about Vietnam,
Yeah,
honestly.
you feel everything in Vietnam quite easy, right? The life easy, everything easy. So I have a lot of friends, a lot of partners. They work overseas when they go to Vietnam, and they see that they want to work in Vietnam. So if we, like Quynh say, if we can build a good environment for people, so not only the talent in Vietnam, not only the people in Vietnam love to work in Vietnam, the people, the talent, the builders, the founder overseas, they will go to work and live in Vietnam. So if we have a lot of people, a lot of talent, so we can, of course, we can build a big company, we can build a big market, everything inside. And the most important thing, like when you stay in Vietnam, you see children everywhere, right? You go to Korea, you don't see any children, right? So about next 10 years, what happened in Korea? But next 10 in Vietnam still so many things is really. So like I mentioned, in Vietnam we young, we talents, and we can do everything. The small thing we can do, the big thing we can do, and the huge thing we still can do. That's the thing. Like in Vietnam, we think that we make everything simple. Yeah, we make everything simple, so you guys can feel easy when you say that we can build a big company. No, in my mind is a company. So everything with me is simple. Like when I 7 years ago, when I start to build the company in blockchain in Vietnam, I have nothing, no money, no human, I know no niche, I know nothing about. But when I build a company, when now I have about 200 people working with me, so I still can, because in Vietnam everything easy. So if you guys want to build a big thing, go to Vietnam.
Yeah, I love that. You're absolutely right. I believe the work environment is a big part of this productivity and this scaling and this growth.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy staying in Vietnam. I feel very productive.
Thank
I
you.
know that I can get a whole lot done. This country is incredible. We've got to wrap it up, but before we do, I'm going to end with one last question across the board. And so I want to ask each of you two things. Number one, what are your final thoughts on the impact or the outlook of implementing a regulatory sandbox framework within Vietnam? And then number two, where can the audience find out more about who you are, what you're doing, whether it's your company website, social media, etc.? Go ahead and show yourself. Let's start with Mr. Chung.
Yeah. Sorry, but I am do not use social media. I don't have Facebook account. I don't have. But the last thing I really want in Vietnam, we have the sandbox. So everything we can go pilot and we testing and we go like organize. And the most important thing that we can build a network in Vietnam with the world. That's why the reason why I when we making this thing with this event, I say we need to build up the keyword that this event the gateway to Vietnam. That means I want to welcome the people outside of Vietnam go to Vietnam to build. So I totally 100% believe that Sandbox will have the this industry in Vietnam will grow really fast. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mr. Donnellan.
Once again, Vietnam's ideally positioned. It's just a matter, like Quynh suggested, of putting the right frameworks in place and making sure that these are experimented over a longitudinal time frame. So within 6 months, 12 months, whenever. So once again, exciting times for Vietnam. It's got all the right, the groundwork is perfect. The baseline is ideal. Just a matter of capitalizing on where it currently is. It's grown to where it is with, I'd say, a need for a bit more clarity, but it's getting there. And that's a really encouraging thing overall. In terms of where to find out more about what we're doing, check out nextdocs.com. Personally, I don't use social media that much, and when I do, it's normally to share my stupid jokes, so I tend to prefer to keep professional there. So thank you very much, and great discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much. Miss Quynh.
So the first question about the impact of the sandbox, I think that is huge. I hope so. And I think that it's the right time that Vietnam should have that already, especially for next year, 2025. It's going to be one of the very key year for blockchain global ecosystem, not only in Vietnam. So when we have that regulation next year, I do believe that it's going to create the great impact into the Vietnam ecosystem. So in terms of what? In terms of number one, that even have the, how to say, booster the strength of the Vietnam ecosystem. So support the builders, support the founders, more, real world use case. Also even can link it with the institution, the government, and then bridging them and to create more impact. The second part is like to attract, as Chung said, that like other global builders, not only from the local perspective, but let's say that, okay, if we have the great sandbox, we have the great regulation, and we support blockchain projects, for sure that Malaysia builders, Philippine builders, Chinese builder, and many other, even like American, European, will go to Vietnam, because the runway here, let's say that, okay, the same amount of money for a startup, let's say that, okay, can have 1 year in America, maybe here in Vietnam can have 5-year runway.
More actually.
Yeah, right. So why not move to Vietnam to live and to build, and you also have huge talent pool, huge, for mass adoption, and also in terms of investment, for sure that the Vietnam government also can attract a lot of investment for that thing. So that create a great impact. And in terms of long-term vision, I just see that, okay, I hope that with that sandbox also can encourage the builder, instead of, like just follow the trend thing, they also think further, like what I build today will create the impact in the next 5 years, 10 years, and also like impact the real world and support Vietnam government, support Vietnam economy. And also, as you mentioned, we have the very young population, right? We have like 35 millions, like, at the age like 18 to 35 years old, and then also like have a lot of young family. So I do believe that, like, with the sandbox and, with the booming of the Vietnam blockchain ecosystem, the next generation also benefit a lot from that. So it means that, like, we have create more jobs for, the younger. We have, even in terms of technology, our young generation also more advanced compared to other country. And you know what? Maybe Vietnam will become the key blockchain hub in the region, not only in the region, but also over the world. Yeah.
I do believe this. Yeah, it's very exciting to think about what the outlook looks like for Vietnam within the next several years. I think the entrepreneurship and the resourcefulness of the Vietnamese people is going to propel this country forward. And I've seen nothing but positive and healthy growth since I first visited Vietnam 2 years ago. So thank you for all of our panelists. Thanks so much for this amazing discussion. Again, I'm Sasha Asheghi, the founding partner of Arcanum Ventures. You can find our company at arcanum.ventures or across any social media platform. Thanks again to all of the sponsors and partners for the event. It's very exciting to be here speaking about this at the Vietnam Tech Impact Summit. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you very much to all the panelists and our moderator for shedding more light on the topic of Sandbox.